Chris Dubel is the director of the National APS Training Center administered by NAPSA, and he will begin the webinar by discussing how safety training has evolved over the years and how the foundational safety components are still the same. And then we'll hear from the state of Washington's Critical Incident and Stress Management Program. This program, I have to look at my notes because it's a really innovative program, but it was established to promote the well-being of APS staff, to support staff in the challenging and stressful work they do. And they have a psychologist and licensed mental health professionals on staff, and they are available to provide confidential critical incident reporting, or debriefing, I'm sorry, crisis intervention, short-term consultation, stress management, resources and referrals to individuals at all levels of their organization. And Sherry Consolis is a regional administrator at Washington's Aging and Long-Term Support Administration. And Dr. Rebecca Estrada is a licensed psychologist and is a critical incident and stress management program manager in the same organization. So we are thrilled to have you both here today, and you as well, Chris, and to hear about this innovative program. So with that said, I will let Chris Dubel take it from here.
Great. Thanks, Jen. As Jen said, I'm Chris, and I direct the National APS Training Center. It's funded by the Administration for Community Living, and as Jen said, administered by NAPSA. Today, I'm here, though, in my role as a trainer and consultant. What Jen mercifully spared the one detail about me is that it is my birthday today, and all of you can make fun of me for being old today because I turned 51 today. So you neglected this.
Got that. That would have been a great opportunity.
Yeah, you could have just. I'm surprised that you didn't take a jab there. So, but the reason I share that is because. Oh, thanks. I'm getting some happy birthdays coming in. Thank you. You're not old till you're 90. Summer, I almost read that as you look 90. I was like, uh-oh. So thanks, everybody. But the reason I share that a little bit is because I've been doing this for a little bit, working and doing training and consultation with APS now for about 23, 24 years. So I'm kind of pulling that OG card on you a little bit. And I want to share some thoughts real briefly because I said this behind their back as well as in front of them. Rebecca and Sherry really are the stars of today's show. I can't wait for them to share what they are doing in Washington State. When Jen shared about it, I got super excited and stoked because I think it is really interesting and engaging and novel approach to supporting teams. So I kind of want to share a little bit and then get out of the way and then let them talk about the things that they're doing. But when I kind of reflected on 20 some years of doing training with APS and particularly training around safety, I thought, well, kind of where are we at with 2023? And what are some of the things that we should be emphasizing or prioritizing in 2023 as we think about safety? Because a lot of safety is basic. What we were doing 20 years ago, we should still be doing now. But some of it has evolved a little bit and some of it has changed. And hopefully, as I share most of this stuff, you'll be like, hey, we're already doing that, Chris. We've got that covered. That's great. Keep doing it. But maybe there'll be a thing or two that I share. I know there's going to be some things when Sherry and Rebecca share that a lot of you are going to be like, you know what, we could do that, or we could do that a little differently, or maybe a little bit more than we do. And this is really, I'm going to try to bounce back and forth between whether you are out in the community in 105-degree heat, somebody weighed in from California, 105, 108-degree heat, wherever you are, whether you're out in the community serving adults with disabilities and older adults, or you're a supervisor, or you're an administrator, or you're a trainer. Hopefully some of the things that all of us share today will have a direct relationship to how you approach safety. The first thing, and the number one thing that I have on the list of what we should be doing in 2023 about safety is talking about safety. APS is an overall safe profession, but it is a profession where our professionals, our workers, find themselves in high-risk situations fairly consistently, fairly often. You might say, Chris, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What I mean by that is most of the time I do safety training, I tell people, I'm not going to share a lot of shock and awe stories for you because I don't have that many stories for you. Now, I've got some pretty bizarre ones. Like the other day, I heard one from an APS professional who said they were doing an interview in a home and a dead possum fell out of the ceiling and landed right beside them. But nobody was hurt. Well, I guess the fate of the possum should be something we're slightly concerned about, but ultimately nobody was hurt. Nobody was injured. A couple years ago, when I was out in the Northwest part of the state, they had a Northwest APS conference and was talking to some of your colleagues. I don't know if we have any on here today from the great state of Alaska. And they told me a story about one of their workers who had to fly in to a remote village to do an assessment or an investigation. And as they flew in, they got on the ground and somebody in a snowmobile, snow machine, pulled up and said, hey, you should get on here and I'll take you into the village. And the worker's like, no, I'm fine walking. And the person said, no, you really should get on here. I'll take you into the village. And she's like, no, that's not our policy. I'm fine with walking. And he finally says to her, no, you should get on here. There is a polar bear walking around here stalking people that particularly doesn't like government workers. No, I don't know that they said that, but there is a polar bear out here stalking and trying to eat people. I said, what did you do? What did the person do? They said they got on the snowmobile and went to town. So I've got a lot of stories about that, but I've got a lot of stories where APS has been successful and effective in being in high risk situations, in getting out of those. But that doesn't take away that we need to be talking. Our success in getting out of these situations doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about them. Because the reality for APS, and I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, is we are going into situations that other human service organizations, other healthcare services have said they're not going to because it's too unsafe. You don't have to chat this, but you can just raise your hand at the computer if you are somebody that is or has gone out into the community and worked with clients and has gone out with law enforcement, and law enforcement has looked at you and said, you go first. I'm guaranteeing you there are a bunch of you that are raising your hand at the computer right now. We go into situations unannounced, alone, oftentimes where law enforcement is either, and I see Raquel, I got one yep in the chat, where law enforcement either has backup already or backup is on the way. And so the reality for us in APS is we are going into unsafe and high-risk situations. And you might say, Chris, well, what does talking do about it? The reason we need to talk about it at every moment, at every intersection that we can, is because talking about it helps it to build into our organizational culture, the priority on safety. My son-in-law works for one of these, he manages one of these large warehouses. It's huge, it's massive. And somewhere on that warehouse is a sign that says how many days it's been since their last safety incident. They are constantly in every staff meeting talking about safety and safety risks. And the reason that he is doing that is to build safety into the culture of what he does. We need to be doing the same in APS. So I really want to encourage you, from a standpoint, if you're on the team that's going out in the community, are you talking about it with your colleagues? Are you providing that coaching to your colleagues of situations that you've been in? Supervisors on the call. Is it a routine part of your supervision when you're staffing cases? Are you saying, hey, were there any safety concerns that you had in any of these cases, over the last week? We get very fixated on determinations, right? And service planning and getting through those. Is your documentation done? Is it certainly a question that supervisors have asked? But are we also making that safety? Administrators, supervisors, is it a regular part? Is it a standing agenda item on our staff for our staff meetings? Are we dedicating time? I know working with the state of Oregon, they've seen a rise in drug cartel activity. So are we putting whatever those concerns are that are rising up in our communities, those issues that our folks are facing, are we putting them on our staff meeting agendas so that we're talking and we're constantly reinforcing with people the importance of safety? Number two is to prioritize safety training. And I say this as a trainer, but I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this. Many years ago, when I would do, again, I've done safety training for a while, but when people would approach me about doing safety training, I'd be like, it takes me 10 seconds to do training on safety. Here it is. When in doubt, get out. And I was like, that's everything that people need to know. When in doubt, get out of the situation. And I think I actually came up with that. So as a free benefit for the webinar, you can use it without trademark issues. But when in doubt, get out of the situation. But then a few years ago, probably more than that by now, I started to realize that saying that was not enough. And I'll give you an example and kind of where I had that light bulb moment from one of your colleagues here in Pennsylvania. I know she doesn't mind me. She's no longer in protective services and doesn't mind me sharing the story. So her name is Heather. Heather responded to a report, and this was in a very rural part of Pennsylvania where I'm at. And she responded to a report and gets to the house, and there's an 80-some-year young woman on the porch with a pistol in her hand, shouting at the APS worker, or Heather, as Heather approaches, says, I shot them all in the barn. They're all dead. I shot them. And so I said to Heather, what did you do? Expecting Heather to say that she got back in her car and left the situation. Heather said, well, I checked the barn, of course. And I said, okay, now I'm a little curious. I said, what'd you find in the barn? She said, there was nothing there. The woman was hallucinating. I'm like, okay, Heather, what did you do next? Because Heather has heard my safety training 3 or 4 times in Pennsylvania. She probably has heard me say, when in doubt, get out 100 times. I said, what did you do next? You left, of course. Heather looks and goes, no, I finished the assessment with the older woman. And I said, well, what about the gun? She said, I made her put the safety on. Like, that was the solution. It was at that moment I thought I had failed miserably as a trainer in conveying my point. But more importantly than my abilities as a trainer or lack thereof was that Heather, as well as many of us who have been around APS for long enough, we start grading safety concerns on a curve. Well, I was in the last situation, and that was really, really sketchy, and I made it out okay. I did all right. So this one, yeah, there might be a gun nearby, or they might have a knife out, or I heard recently of somebody where as soon as they went in, they locked the gate behind them. Well, I made it out of there okay. So this new situation isn't quite as bad, even though there are indicators there. And that's reinforced for me over the last several years is that our safety training cannot only be information, it also needs to be practice. Jen gave a plug. Hopefully many of you are coming to the NAPSA conference. We have a workshop presenter there by the name of Dan Elliott, who's a renowned expert on safety and has worked with APS for a long time. And I don't know if he'll be doing it at this workshop, but normally for his workshops, he has people out in the hallway practicing the things that he has talked about. So we can do that informally with our colleagues, kind of role play through supervision. Supervisors, we can do that with our teams, is kind of go through those things. But my trainers, my administrators on this call, think about, how do we do experiential training? We may just do training on this is what you do, when in doubt, get out. But particularly for those doubt indicators like threats, like prolonged escalation, like weapons in the house, having people practice that, having people have some level of that experience before they go out. Katie, our instructional designer at the National APS Training Center, and I were just on a call with New Zealand's law enforcement training entity yesterday, talking about their use of augmented reality and simulation experiences for law enforcement for crisis situations. And we're looking at how can we bring that over to the NATC. Now, that's not happening soon because there's a lot involved in that. But we will be putting out some safety training at the NATC that's informational next year. But we really want to look ahead and future of how can people practice the things that they need to teach. So locally, at your states, your territories, please be thinking not only about how do we explain about safety, but how can we incorporate into our training how to practice it. Number 3 is know where everyone is. Know where they are, know how long they're expected to be there, and know what to do when they don't get back when they are expected. What I'm about to share is a concern. It's not a critique. I understand that all of our states, all of our territories, even within states and territories, the process can be different. But I will be very frank that getting now to talk with people across the country, I'm still hearing some pretty antiquated ways. I'm hearing people say they have a paper sign out and sign in. And then my response is always, well, who checks that? And the response is usually from them, well, I guess somebody will. That's not good enough for our modern era of APS. And a word that I don't like using for APS too often is the word invest. But this is an area where I think we need to look and we need to prioritize investing in the technology that allows us to know where people are. Now, that may mean some fancy things for some of you. I've heard some really creative solutions, and if anybody wants to email me, I'd be glad to share them with you. Using Microsoft Teams, using Outlook calendars, and different ideas there. So that may be investing in some technology that you don't have, but that also may just be investing some time resource into figuring out how can the technology that you do have help to know where people are at all times. The other point on here that I want to make sure that we focus on is we really need to make sure that there are no exceptions to that. Another one of your colleagues here in Pennsylvania several years ago, and this story ends up okay. I told you I'm not going to share kind of shock and awe stories, but this story ends up okay. But she had gone out on a Friday afternoon around 2:30, 3 o'clock to do a visit, a new initial assessment. Just like for everyone that's on this call, it was an unannounced visit. And just like for all of you, our clients aren't always just sitting around waiting for us to show up at the door, right? So she gets there, no one's home, can't find anybody. So she says, you know what? On my way home, I've got another client, have a great relationship with them. I've been out there 2 or 3 times, and all I need to do is to have them sign some paperwork. And this agency did not have a great sign out, sign in process. People knew that she was going out on this particular case, but there was no kind of communication back. And so she goes, I'm going to go and just have them sign some papers, and then I'm going to head home. As she puts it, the moment she opened the door, while the person was the same physical person, it was not the same person that she had seen many different times before. And as we debriefed about that, every other visit that she had had with that person was at 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning. And this person had some situations in their life that meant that by 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, they were in a very different cognitive state than they were at 9 a.m., 10 a.m. And as she and I debriefed, even though she was able to get out of the situation quickly when he attempted to trap her in his house, and she was able to get out extremely quickly, he was not successful at all. But that was his intent. That was his attempt to do. we realized that nobody would have known where she was until Monday, or even begun thinking about it until Monday. We really need, for those of you that are out in the communities doing practice, it's really important, even if you don't have a sophisticated system, that you are texting your colleagues and saying, hey, I just left such and such a case and the neighbor wants to talk to me, so I'm just walking over to the neighbor's house. It takes a couple seconds. People should always know where we're at. Supervisors, administrators, that should be a standard of our practice in 2023 as we approach safety. Just two more, and then I'm going to turn it over to the folks from Washington. This one I want to be a little careful of, because I know some of you do some very extensive de-escalation training, and I totally support that. But it's been a little bit my observation at times that we over teach de-escalation for APS as opposed to teaching about leaving a situation. I am going to say something that I hope Jen doesn't, Sperry doesn't disconnect my Zoom for, but I'm going to empower every single one of you, regardless of what state or territory you're from, to leave a situation 10 minutes too early than attempt to leave a situation 1 second too late. We should be using de-escalation. We should learn de-escalation techniques. But from my observations of APS, it has one of two purposes. One is an attempt, or maybe a second attempt, to get our interview, get our conversation back on track. But we're not crisis workers. We're not hostage negotiators. We're APS professionals. The second is, if we are in a situation to use those techniques to get us to be able to leave, where we are in a situation where somebody is blocking our way of getting out of that situation, we should absolutely be using de-escalation techniques. But our focus in training, our focus in supporting our colleagues, our focus for ourselves should always be in thinking about leaving and not over attempting or overusing de-escalation. You see my bottom point here on the screen. It's not a cardinal rule, but use that de-escalation technique once, maybe twice. But if we start talking about we had to use it 3 or 4 times, I'm going to start making the argument, well, maybe we needed to leave even if it was 10 minutes too early. So as you think about the use of de-escalation, always think about it in conjunction with leaving. The last point, and I think it's going to segue well to what the folks from Washington are going to be talking about, is sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me should not be a part of what we teach in APS. What our APS folks deal with, what all of you deal with, from an emotional standpoint, from verbal insults to what I call emotional assault, is just as serious as physical. And please don't take this as Chris being judgmental, because I'm going to be very honest with you. This was not in my safety training for like 18, 19 years. I only started to put this in my safety training about 1.5 years ago. We need to take this extremely seriously. And I'm just going to give you 2 examples before we segue over to Rebecca and Sherry. One is a personal example, and the second is an APS example. My personal example is my oldest son, Austin, who for some reason decided to follow in his dad's social work footsteps initially. And then also decided to work with older adults, and was working with older adults in New York City. Austin, who doesn't mind me telling you the details of this story, is also openly gay. Austin had a client in New York City that was not happy with services or something that was going on, or frustrated about something, and decided to verbally insult Austin using homophobic words that I won't even dignify by giving you the first letter to. They're words that none of us would tolerate. I'll never forget Austin calling me after, next day after the visit with that client, emotionally upset, in tears. And I'll never forget that he said to me, "Dad, I would have rather had him punch me because I think the physical bruise I would have healed a lot faster than what I'm feeling by these words." And being kind of that solutions focus, I said, "Well, Austin, did you talk to your supervisor about it?" And Austin's response was, "Yes. My supervisor said, get used to it. That will happen over and over and over again to you. Get used to it." I can't say it's directly related, but Austin's no longer working in human services. We are focused on retention in APS. I can tell you that part of Austin's experience was not getting that support for that emotional and psychological abuse. Just to end the story, just briefly before I go on to the APS example real quickly, is Austin is now in retail, working at a medical marijuana dispensary here in Pennsylvania. He describes his career at an all-time high. Okay, if you didn't get that joke or you thought that joke was dumb, I'm about done, all right? APS example, I recently had someone come to me. I'm getting some LOLs, thank you. I recently had one of your APS colleagues come to me after a training, very similar, but for different reasons. And she was a young APS worker. Her age doesn't matter as much as we're trying to recruit younger APS workers to be in our field and stay in our field. Tori said, I almost choked on my water. Chris with the dad jokes. She came to me after doing the training and said that she had been out and had been called a racist word that I won't give you the first letter to, but a racist word. And she said to me, she said, Chris, I know that this word is out there, but I've never, ever had this word directed at me with such hatred and anger. And she said, and this had been a couple months, and she was tearing up, she was getting emotional. She said, every time I get a new report, I tense up a little bit on that new report going, will this happen to me again? She's like, I don't know how much longer I can do it. I asked her about what her supervisor said, and her supervisor was much more supportive than Austin's, but then proceeded to say all the cases that they had had where they had been called that. And she's like, that's not what she said, I know my supervisor was trying to be, but that's not what I needed to hear. The bottom line of this is we need to take the emotional abuse, insults, assault, whatever we want to call it, that sometimes we experience in APS just as seriously. If it's us that have received it, that self-care, that use of support, that use of professional support, therapy, our colleagues, whatever that is, supervisors, we need to make sure we are not only strong with our folks, but a place for them to cry. And there's a good question. What should the supervisor have said? I think what the supervisor should have said is, man, that must have been tough to hear. Tell me more about it. Because the supervisor can say that, hey, a reality of this situation is that you may hear things again, but tell me how you were feeling about it. Tell me how I can support you in dealing with this. How can I support you with getting back into the field? And I think that the question that Rachel, you asked of what should a supervisor have said really is a great transition question to turn it over to Rebecca and Sherry, where in Washington State, they haven't only said what should the supervisor say, but they are also saying, what should we do as an agency? What should we do as an organization to support the best interest, the safety, and the welfare of APS? Before I turn it over, certainly contact me through NAPSA. We're happy, I know it was really quick, happy to provide you any resources, further thoughts, would love to do that. But without me rambling any further, let me turn it over to Rebecca and Sherry.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully that worked for everyone. Yes. All right. So
It looks like
I'm,
it's still Chris's. Sorry, Rebecca.
oh,
Maybe up here it goes. There we go.
there it is. All
Thank
right.
you.
Great. So I'm so excited to talk about my job, really. So this is great. I'm excited to have all of you here and to be able to share what we do and how we offer this support to staff. And I thought we'd just start by introducing ourselves. So Sherry.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sherry Consolis. I am one of 3 regional administrators for APS in Washington State. I have been with the department for 28 years, which is kind of hard to believe since I'm only 35. But kind of like Chris, I'm kind of aging a little long in the tooth there. I've done a variety of jobs within the department, so that's who I am today.
And I'm Rebecca Estrada, and I am a licensed psychologist. I've been in the field of mental health for 20 plus years. I won't give you the exact number, but I've worked in a lot of different areas, from community mental health, providing individual couples group therapy, and doing inpatient work, worked with youth and families in the home and in the community. So also working in corrections, working both with offenders and working with staff, and then a lot of experience doing that crisis response intervention and doing post-crisis work. And some of my roles have included those supervisory roles, management, administrators, and also doing program development, which we'll talk a little bit about today. Sherry.
So we just needed to inform you that this project was supported by the Administrations for Community Living, ACL, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, as part of a financial assistance award totaling $1,962,724, with 66% funding by ACL HHS. The contents are those of the authors, Rebecca and I, and do not necessarily represent the official views of nor an endorsement by ACL, HHS, or the US government. Our little disclaimer. So we wanted to share a little bit about what APS in Washington State looks like. Our state is broken up into 3 different regions. I am the regional administrator over Region 1, which is the light yellow, which you can see is half of the map of Washington State. It's a very large geographic area that my team covers. We have about 163 staff doing APS work. The other 2 regions kind of split the rest of the the western side of the state, and with our Region 2 and our Region 3, they each have their own regional administrators. Then our headquarters is kind of tucked into our Region 3 area, and they have about 82 staff, which do include some of our centralized teams, our centralized intake, our centralized due process. So that's just kind of a little bit of a makeup of what APS in Washington looks like.
Thanks, Sherry. And just to give you an idea, I'm in Region 2, so you know where I cover. All right. So in talking about my role and talking about the difficult work that APS workers do, I always love to share this quote, and it's the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and daily loss and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. The work that helping professionals do, it's impossible to not be touched by the work, to not be touched by the individuals that you're serving. And with that, it's important to keep in mind that there are what I may call occupational hazards just by being in the field of a helping professional. And not to mention, just by working, anybody who works is also struggling right now. The US is struggling with burnout. There was a 2021 research study that was done. It was a work and well-being study that showed that 79% of US workers experienced work-related stress in the past month. So this is just across the board. And then when you start breaking it down a little bit further, and look at those in the helping profession, there was a meta-analysis that showed that 50% of helping professionals are experiencing some form of significant distress just as a result of their work. Then to break it down even further, to look at APS workers specifically, there was a 2018 study that showed that when they were collecting their data, 80% of APS workers reported within that past month, they experienced some type of hazard exposure. And some of those examples were things that Chris just talked about, which were, those cluttered living spaces, having insect infestations. Apparently having possums fall from the ceiling could count as one of those things. And not just to mention those things, but being yelled at, cursed at, belittled by a client or family members. So having that high exposure is significantly associated with burnout and compassion satisfaction. And looking at, depending on what study you're looking at, between 40 and 85% of helping professionals are at a much higher likelihood of developing things like vicarious trauma and having higher rates of compassion fatigue or traumatic symptoms. So the work is challenging. It's not an easy job. And with those things in mind, we come to our program. Okay, so in 2019, just to give you a little breakdown of how we've come to where we are right now, there was a previous regional administrator who was in Region 3 who really wanted to look at how can we support our staff? What can we do? And she created a role, developed this position. And in 2019, there was a psychologist who was hired to provide support. After a successful pilot project, I think a lot of the success was actually shown because of the support that was able to be provided regarding the pandemic. There was a lot that happened. There were a lot of different things going on. And I think it really solidified that we need this type of support for our staff. Thankfully, because of COVID, we did get some grant funding that became available so that the other two regions were able to find some funding and be able to create those positions in their regions. So in July of 2021, I was hired, but just before I was hired, the psychologist who had been in Region 3 left to pursue some other opportunities. Thankfully, I came in with some previous experience working in this type of work, offering support to helpers. So I was able to jump in and get some things going. Hopefully it felt pretty quick. And then with that, then in the next several months, I was the sole person for a little while, but maybe about 9-10 months later, we were able to get someone hired back in Region 3. And then we were able to get someone over in Region 1 for Sherry's. So thankfully now we are fully staffed. Our state is staffed for our positions. Chris gave some great examples of critical incidents. So we know that our staff struggle with this. This is something that they are, I hate to say it, but we know it's inevitable that being out in the field is going to lead to some of these things. When you never know. But one of the things that we provide support around, and I'll talk more about our support in just a little bit, but just wanted to talk about some of the things that you all see in your work and have likely experienced if you've been around for sometimes even just, you don't even have to be around for very long before you can encounter some of these things. Sadly, we lose people along the way, whether it's a colleague, whether it's staff, friend, family member. We do have communities within our teams. So teams, they know each other. They spend time outside of work together. So if one of those team members loses a friend or a family member, sometimes a whole team is impacted by a loss. And that can also include losing clients or caregivers that people have been working with for a little while or been trying to get them resources. And sometimes that happens more often than not, especially working with the population that they do. We unfortunately have staff that get sick or have unexpected illnesses. COVID was sadly the perfect example of that, where there were staff members who were out and their teammates didn't know when or even if sometimes they were coming back, given their level of illness. Chris gave that example of, getting assaulted on the job, where it's not necessarily just that physical assault. It can be those verbal assaults. Those words do have impacts, and it can take its toll as well, especially when it's happened more than once. Sadly, we also have things that happen just at the workplace. We've had bomb threats where staff have to get evacuated or shelter in place because there's been shootings happening outside of our parking lots, or outside of our buildings. We also have things that happen in our community. Sadly, have worked with staff members who they're struggling to even just focus on their right now because their child is at school and is having to do a shelter in place because there's been some sort of a threat on the school. So how do you keep working when that stuff is going on? Natural disasters are everywhere. Over here, we're just about to approach our wildfire season. Staff live in those areas and may potentially have to evacuate their home, potentially even lose their home. And once again, how do you keep coming to work when all of this is happening outside of work? And then there's all of those unexpected things that can happen. Whoops, just slid right on through. There are those things that are just unexpected. We have newer staff who come on board who just, as much training as we give them, as much as we tell them, these are things that you might encounter when you're out in the field, there's nothing like encountering it head on, and in real life, in real time. And I often hear from new staff saying, wow, nothing could have prepared me for what I just, for that interview or for that encounter. And then we also do have administrative staff, administrative assistants and support staff who are going through documentation, who are seeing pictures, who are having to scan all of these documents and are hearing the stories just by being in the office and by being around it. So no one is immune to the difficult content. And what I would say that I get the most of is just that cumulative stress. Overall, the years that when staff have been around for a little while, it builds up. I can't tell you how many times I've had staff come to me, veteran staff who have been doing this work for a long time, potentially worked in other fields, and said, I have seen so much of this, and I don't know why this is the one that's impacting me today. I don't know why today is so hard. But that's just speaking to that cumulative effects of the job. So with that, we do a lot of the hopefully preventive stress management piece. Our support does look like, I told you we have myself, I'm the psychologist, and then we have 2 licensed mental health counselors. All of our support is completely voluntary. Nobody has to talk to us if they don't want to. We do provide confidential support, but then again, we are mandatory reporters. So we make sure to let staff know this as we're working with them. But so, with that, if anybody says that they're of harm to themselves or someone else, we're going to act on that. If there's any concern about child or vulnerable adult abuse, we're going to act on that. Something that is a little bit more specific to our roles is that if there's a staff person who's saying things that may pose a potential safety concern or risk to their work or to the community, we would have to act on that. My example that I always give is if a staff person says, hey, I'm just so stressed out that I've started drinking while on the job and I'm going out and doing individual face-to-face interviews, I can't let that just happen. There are so many risks that go along with that. And then along with that, because staff are able to meet with me free of charge during their work time, if a supervisor does say, hey, did you meet with this person? I will only be able to tell them when and for how long I met with them, but I won't tell them anything outside of that. Staff have really appreciated the confidentiality piece for obvious reasons. Something that was a little bit more of a surprise is that I've met with so many staff who say, okay, so what are you going to do with this? Is there going to be some sort of change? Is there going to be something that happens? You can use my name, it's okay. And I will say, no, I don't want to create any sort of perception by naming anyone that I'm not maintaining confidentiality. So what I do is I put together a monthly report that I give to my supervisor that just has themes. So if there are staff that are talking about, multiple staff that are talking about something in particular, I'll keep track of that to just be able to share with my supervisor to say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what staff are really struggling with. And then also just keeping track of how many consultations I'm doing and what that looks like. So with the type of support, debriefs. This is probably the most obvious. If somebody's just encountered or experienced one of those critical incidents, I'm here to debrief if they would like to. It's always voluntary. They don't have to share anything that they don't want to or don't feel comfortable with, but I can provide that for them. And while I am a psychologist, I don't provide therapy. So in these roles, we're not doing ongoing therapy. It's more consultation. So we're talking about work or personal life stressors, looking at problem solving. What can you do? Let's talk this out. I can also offer caseload consultations regarding mental health issues. That's why I mentioned the various places that I've worked and the different experiences that I've had, because I want people to be able to tap into that resource. Like, let me help. If there's something that I can do, you're struggling on a case, what can I do to step in? Or how can I offer any kind of information that would be helpful? If there just so happens to be a couple of staff who might be having difficulties with each other or with their supervisor, we can facilitate discussions so that hopefully they can, maybe we can problem solve and figure out a way for them to work more collaboratively together. Because I'm not their therapist, if it's something that they are likely going to need more ongoing support around, I will do the legwork. I'll give them a list of providers so that they can reach out, and they don't have to worry about, well, do they have a wait list? Do they accept my insurance? Just tell me what you're wanting, if there's a specialty that you want, and I'll get it to you. I can also do resource searches. So if they're looking for something specific, I can help provide anything that they need for that. And truly, our main goal is to support staff and doing ongoing assessing of what that means, what that looks like. And because of that, other support that we provide are drop-ins. This was something that came out of staff saying, hey, can we do something like this? Can we come together as staff without our supervisors and talk about some of the stressors, talk about some of the challenges that we're experiencing? It's been a fantastic way for staff to support each other. Sometimes I just sit back and am in awe of how much they support and are just boosting each other up when somebody's having a tough day or having a tough time. I go out to the offices. We have various offices within our region, and I offer office hours where staff can schedule time to meet with me privately, face to face in this virtual world. Sometimes it's nice to see those faces in person. And I do trainings. So this is not uncommon for me, where I will put together something, we as a team will put together something related to compassion fatigue or managing change in the workplace or secondary traumatic stress, vicarious trauma, et cetera, and provide those quarterly. And along with that, also providing things that are maybe more specific to supervisor needs, or even just offering the exact same thing just to supervisors, because it gives them a safe space to be able to talk about things without their staff present. I created a SharePoint site pretty soon into my time here, where articles, information, just different types of resources were available for them. And along with that, I also put together articles either for our region or for statewide that get sent out just on various topics with not just, oh, here's a problem, but here's also some things that you can do. And I'm always open to any supervisors or anybody saying, hey, can we get a training on this? Can you offer something around this? And some of those have been just fantastic in that way. And I'm also a mental health first aid instructor. So this is something that we're able to provide training to our staff around, you know, what do you do when somebody is in a mental health or experiencing a mental health challenge? And they can learn some tools with that. So I also do the coordinating. And this is something I get asked a lot. So what's the difference? Why not just utilize EAP? Why you? And I just want to say EAP offers fantastic services. Ours are just, there's similar and there's some differences along the way. So they do provide more of the counseling. They can do debriefing. And from what I've heard, I've gotten some positive feedback that they have been able to do that pretty quickly. Whereas, like I said, I'm not providing therapy, I'm doing more of that consultation, but I can do something in the moment. If somebody's struggling right now, they can reach out to me, or if they need to debrief, they can do it right now. Nobody has to fill out a form for me. Whereas with EAP, they do, there's a form that they need to complete, or if they do call in, they do have to offer some things. But for me, all they have to do, they can reach out by email, they can call me, they can send me just a Teams message, just saying, hey, when do you have time? And I'm happy to be there in that way. And with that, sometimes there can be a little bit of a wait with EAP, but with my support, I am usually able to meet with them sometimes pretty immediately right after they send a message. And that can, because it's not necessarily as formal, if they need to meet for a little bit longer than the 50-minute session, I can meet with them for longer so that they can debrief, so that they can process. And then lastly, EAP, they are state employees, whereas I am not only a state employee, but I also work with APS. I'm employed by APS. So because I go to their meetings, because I have to sit in the same trainings as they do, I do have what I hope to be a better understanding of the work that they do. And they might feel a little bit more comfortable because they see me in their office, because they see me more regularly. And as we know, it's easier to reach out to somebody that you know, as opposed to some unknown person. And I can also do some outreach if somebody's struggling. So either a staff member or supervisor can say, hey, do you mind reaching out to so-and-so? Or I see them in a meeting and they're not their typical self. I can just contact them and reach out. But then, of course, I'm happy to refer to EAP for staff who don't want to talk to me. So which is okay. I just want them to get the support that they need. So I'm happy to get them connected with EAP. Sherry?
So just real quick, because I know we're running out of time and it looks like there's a few questions. I was initially hesitant to embark down this journey with this position and in my region, wasn't sure exactly what the person would be doing for us. I hired a fantastic person like Rebecca, and I can't imagine our work environment without her in it. She has done such tremendous work working with staff. They report feeling so supported, appreciate the ability to debrief with her when they're having a difficult situation, an incident. We recently had a death in our region of a staff member unexpectedly that kind of shook everybody's world. Investigator was out and just got assaulted, just able to support those people when there are those critical incidents, and then really working on the cumulative and trying to get us to be healthier, doing things that will help and with our health. So staff feel healthier. They feel like they can separate work, personal life better. They come back to work more rested and ready to hit the ground running. So and the position supports all across the org chart, for lack of a better word. They're constantly checking in with our supervisors, our program managers, myself. How are you doing? I heard you guys had a really difficult case. It's just a really great support. So I would strongly encourage, if you have the ability to tap into some grant funding or find some FTE to support something like this, your staff, your program will really benefit from it. So that's my spiel.
And then, yeah, so lastly, here's the resource or references if you wanted to look more into that, some of that research that I offered. And then feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. I know we're like at time, but don't hesitate to send me an email. I'd love to talk to you if you want to know more. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, all three of you. What a great presentation that will really hopefully be replicated across the country. There was one question in here that I actually had when we spoke. It's voluntary, but Kat Preston Wager is wondering if the support team is proactive in doing outreach. And I think you answered that by saying you go to staff meetings and you're constantly, saying I'm here. And I also asked, can a supervisor suggest a staff person go? And that's true too. So it's very, very open. It's all about just supporting the staff. So they'd like a copy of the presentation. How should we put Chris's in the chat, but your slides,
I can
put them in.
Figure out how to do that really quick for you
I
all.
know.
Or I can send it to you all if you
email
whatever.
Rebecca, maybe.
And I'm not sure we'll get a chance to tackle Jacqueline's question, but I think it's a really good question. So Jacqueline, feel free to email Rebecca or myself about kind of how do you balance that trauma of the unexpected when you're out alone in the field. I think Rebecca would be a great resource. So even though we probably don't have time to dive into that here, I don't want to ignore that question because I think it's a really, really good one. So feel free. I'm volunteering you, Rebecca. I'm sure you won't mind to take that on from Jacqueline.
Chris is getting away with all kinds of stuff today because it's his birthday. So you guys know.
Not it.
But thank you so much. And I applaud Washington for really providing this kind of support to their APS workers. So hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.